Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drum Mission. Forgive the glasses once again today. This isn't because of an allergy though, it's because I got a light right here in my face. And it's one of those cloudy days, I just can't seem to get enough light in the room to really do a good job in the filming. But I wanted to do this and I wanted to get this out today because it's fresh in our minds. And we're talking about the Springsteen Fatman debacle. And you know who I mean when I say Fatman. Right? Because if you're one of the people that think that the president is 224 pounds, 6'3", you're an idiot. Okay? And you're one of the people I'm directing this at. This video is not directed at Springsteen really or the Fat Man. It's directed really to those people that think that musicians or artists in general should just shut up and sing, shut up and paint. Don't tell us your political views. And that's absolutely ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. Any art or artists worth their salt is going to comment on the things of the day. And let me say this, that for history, and I'm talking, when I say history, I'm not talking about the 60s, I'm talking about the last several thousand years. All art, and that's literature, theater, music, at least some portion of it has been spent to speak out against tyranny, to speak in defiance to the oppressor, to defend those who are oppressed, to defend the poor and the needy. This is art. Is some art just fun? Yeah, let's talk about the Beatles a little bit. The Beatles started their career doing She Loves You, Yeah, 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 and I Want to Hold Your Hand, and that was just fun. But as time went on, they didn't just do that. They didn't just do that. You know, and then even later on, they did songs like Helter Skelter, but they also did Happiness is a Warm Gun. You know, both were going on. Because if you have a musician, for me, but like I said, if you're one of the people that just think art should just be She Loves You, Yeah, 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 it should just be paintings of trees and kittens, I don't even want to know you. I don't want to know you. It just means as a person you have no depth. I mean, because then all we're left with is like that reporter, and if I can find a clip, I'll put it up, who asked the president in the White House briefing room, she asked the press secretary, that the president is so hot right now. What's he doing? Is that what you want? Is that what are you that stupid, that shallow that you want a reporter to ask that guy, oh, he's so hot right now? That is grade A propaganda. In this world right now, we've got Palestinians dying by the tens of thousands. We've got trouble with Ukraine and Russia, which could end up being, who knows, World War III. We don't need reporters doing that. We don't need our musicians just saying, everything's great, everything's wonderful, everything's great. So now let's go back in history and talk about a few people that use their art to speak out in defiance, and how even thousands of years later, we remember. And you know what I'm going to start with? I'm going to start with Jesus Christ. Well, wait a minute, Glenn. He's my Lord and Savior, and he wasn't an artist. He didn't have a band. He didn't paint. No, he was a literary artist. The Bible is a book of literature, and one of the things that Jesus did is he spoke in parables. And parables, whether you want to know it or not, it is a literary genre. In other words, in the parable, Jesus told a story that would make a point, but it would shade it a little bit, sugarcoat it a little bit, so it was a little bit, so the medicine was a little easier to swallow. And those parables often spoke against the religious leaders of the time. We know he didn't like the Pharisees in the synagogue. He was turning tables over, and it also spoke against Rome. And he used those parables to speak out for the poor and for the needy. And what I'm thinking of right now is the parable of the Good Samaritan. We've all heard of that parable. And in that parable, Jesus was speaking about Samaria, who at the time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees all thought that Samaria was a terrible, terrible place with terrible, terrible people. And at the end of that parable, Jesus is basically saying, you know what? The Samaritan, I would rather hang out with them than hang out with you guys. Because they're nicer. And they understand love more than you do. They understand what it means to love God more than you do. They understand what it means to love their fellow man more than you do. And that was a knife right in the heart of the religious leaders. And he also did parables that kind of was pointed at Rome. But as people started to follow him and call and listen to his message, Rome got scared and they killed him for it. So there has always been a price to pay. So the fact that the Fatman said to Bruce Springsteen, good luck him getting in the country. Now, Bruce got in the country and everything was fine. But the fact that he said that, this is nothing new. I wish I could say that government trying to silence dissidents was just a Trump thing. But no, this has been going on for time and memoriam. All right, so that's Jesus. Let's fast forward back to the Beatles. In particular, now the Beatles did a bunch of things too that were anti-establishment. But let's focus on John Lennon. Now he spoke adamantly against Vietnam. He spoke adamantly against Vietnam. And Richard Nixon tried to get him deported. He tapped his phone. They had surveillance on him. They were following John Lennon. And that's why there were conspiracies about Mark Chapman. I think that Mark Chapman is just a crazy person and shot John Lennon. I don't think there's a conspiracy. There are conspiracies out there. I don't think so. But Richard Nixon tried to get him deported. And I wish I could say that Nixon did it, you know, that he was worried about communism in Vietnam or anything. No. The reason why Nixon tried to get him deported, because young people were following and listening to John Lennon. He had a following. And Nixon was afraid, and you can look this up on Google, that Lennon would take away or cause young people. There wasn't that much of a youth vote for Nixon, but the little that he had, he was afraid that Lennon would take away the little youth vote that Nixon had and he would lose the election. So Nixon wasn't doing that because of any care for the world. It was his own preservation of power. And that's the same thing that the Fatman tried to do by scaring Springsteen or acting like a tough guy with Springsteen. That, people might listen to Bruce. He's so thin-skinned and he's so weak in his positions. And that's what it tells me. When I see a leader like Nixon, who's the president of the United States, or the Fatman, who's the president of the United States, coming out against a rock star, a musician, I know that that person knows how weak their position is. And that any dissidence at all, any speech that points out those things that are wrong could make that house of cards completely fall. Completely fall. So yes, John Lennon. And of course, we know the 60s. We know Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and all these musicians. Even Bach, way back when, used to do counterpoint melodies because the church didn't like it. And he was telling them, no, I'm doing this anyway. I'm putting polyphonic counterpoint melodies, even though you told me not to do it. So there was always defiance against authority. Always defiance against authority. And sometimes, especially in today's culture, music or art is the only thing that's going to get the point across. Because right now we do have our rights being taken away. And the only thing that may save us, look, Congress, they're all bought and paid for. And Trump's a lost cause. The only thing that may save us is us. The point of my video is this. This was a grand experiment. A democracy that would be run by and for the people. And that when it started to go off the rails, we could speak to it. We could speak freely to it without retaliation. As we work together to fight for our democracy, we take the hands of our brethren, our Palestinian brethren, our Jewish brethren, our Christian brethren, our Muslim brethren, our transgender brethren, our atheist brethren. And we say in the words of Jean-Luc Picard, this far and no farther. No farther. Because America is a great idea. And it's come time where we have to fight for her. And no, it's not time to say to the artist, shut up and sing, when it might be the artist that sparks that seed in us to stand up and say, this far, no farther. Thanks, guys, for letting me share my thoughts. Anyway, next week I'll be back on the kit with a really cool Steve Gadd groove, and I'm working it up right now as I'm talking to you. See you in the next one.
The line must be drawn here. This far, no farther.